Okay, we are answering all of your wedding Q&A, so let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Celesta. We talk about all things luxury shopping and handbags. If you love those things, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do post videos every week. Okay, so we're obviously here with my new husband and we are answering all of your questions. Before we start, I feel like we can just give like a quick breakdown of everything about the wedding. So we had 80 guests at our wedding. We did it in Lake Como, Villageno. So we already have it split out in different categories. We have planning, organization, fashion, and like wedding dresses, like all of that stuff. We have the wedding experience and like things we would do differently, and then of course finance. So for the first thing with wedding planning, I feel like the first thing we did was determine like who was on our guests and estimate how many people. I feel like there were a couple people that we knew they wouldn't be able to make it all the way to Italy, or like down the road we just lost touch with them even before invitations went out. So I feel like we swapped guests like in and out, but regardless, I feel like you have to start with like how many people you want at the wedding and then start looking for a venue then, and then determine your budget and like all of these things, because all of that is variable depending on how many people you want at the wedding. Did you hire someone for branding or design? No, we did have a wedding planner. Our understanding was that she was supposed to help with kind of the branding and design aspect of things, but I think also we kind of knew what I wanted going into wedding planning to begin with, so we didn't really rely on her that heavily, and she really didn't give us that much like artistic design suggestions. What wedding website did you use? Okay, so we used Bliss and Bone. I created websites on The Knot, on Zola, on Minted. I did literally all the big websites. I created a website on those and I just didn't love it. And I probably spent like months doing this, like at least 6 weeks doing this, and before we even sent out anything. And we decided on Bliss and Bone, and I think in hindsight I probably wouldn't be paying $12.99 to use that website, because I feel like a lot of people didn't even look at our website. They asked me the same questions that I already put on the website, and so I feel like in hindsight, I would have just stuck with a more basic wedding website that also happened to be free, and then allocate that, $100-something to literally anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you were very particular about what you wanted, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think no matter how many times you send people the website, sometimes they're still going to ask questions. I feel like that goes from events to weddings to everything else in between too. So not too unexpected. Factors
you considered when deciding on the venue. I think for me, we already knew that people were coming all the way to Italy, let alone like Lake Como is not exactly easy to get to. Like from San Francisco, there's no direct flight to Milan, so you already have to transfer somewhere. And then from Milan, you either need to take a cab or a train, or technically 2 trains to get to Lake Como. So we decided that we wanted something a little bit more centrally located. So we picked something literally in Como Central. And I think that was really good. And then that way you're not stuck on like whatever hotel is close by, because if you go further into the lake, there's only very few select hotels available, and most of those are like $1,200 a night. So I kind of like that we did it in Como Central, so people can pick Airbnb, they can pick hotel. Like there's a lot more hotel options, there's a lot more food options, it's walkable, and like people in theory could walk to the venue if they needed to.
Yeah, also not everyone is comfortable renting and driving a car in a foreign country too. And having it a little bit closer to the city center, I think made it just generally more accessible for folks, especially those who hadn't been to Lake Como or were very experienced traveling abroad.
And the last question for planning and organization, any tools that helped you organize, any checklists you want to share? Oh my God. Yes, we lived in Notion. My entire life is in Notion anyways, not sponsored, but I created almost like a wedding planning dashboard. I'll leave it in the description box, but you guys can check it out. And I have everything from like the budget planning, guest list tracker, and like their dietary restrictions, all of the tasks that you need to do from planning your bachelorette to the welcome party and music and officiant speech, and like literally everything is like on this Notion dashboard. This is exactly what I use, so I'll leave it linked in the description box below if you guys are interested in checking it out. But I don't know if I would have been able to do it without it, honestly, because I feel like there's so many different tasks that you need to do. And then also having to think of the task to do and then assign it to him or assign it to my maid of honor. It just made things like a lot more streamlined, I feel.
Just have everything in one spot. Honestly, I think just overall really useful, not only for her, but for me and the rest of the people involved in the wedding.
Moving over to fashion and style, I feel like I can answer a lot more of these questions than you can. So how long in advance did you start dress shopping? Well, I said yes to the dress June of 2023. So about 11 months from the wedding. I started shopping 1 year out from the wedding. And then I said yes to the second dress September of 2023. Both dresses arrived just around Christmas time and January. And then the ceremony dress that I did alterations at, I did it directly at the bridal boutique. And I think in hindsight, I would have just done it outside, because the girl outside, if you guys are in the Bay Area, I'll leave her Yelp below, but she did it in 3 weeks versus the boutique girl, she took like 3 months, 3.5 months. So I think if you're a little bit more rushed on your schedule and whatnot, just find someone kind of external. How much was the upcharge for custom measurements? Okay, so that I guess also played a big role in like the alteration time frame. So I did a custom sizing. For my ceremony dress, I did a glitter tool. I added off the shoulders. I added pearls on the flower applique. And then I did a glitter tool layer and then split sizing. So I was a wedding size, bridal size 8 at the top and then 6 at the waist, I think, or like vice versa. And then also because I'm 4'11", I had a custom length as well. So all the customizations for the first dress was $1,200, and then the second dress I had the same split sizing, but I didn't have any additional alterations for that, and that was $285 just for the custom sizing. And I think that's more worth it than getting the dress off the rack and then altering it with the seamstress. Thoughts on having 2 dresses and spending minimal time in each? Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I think both of them were gorgeous. It allowed for you to dance a little bit better or move around a little bit better in the second one as opposed to the ceremony.
Yeah, I liked both dresses, and I think that's why I went with having both. I think going into wedding dress shopping, I wasn't thinking about having both, and then at one boutique, the bridal stylist, she was like, oh, well, if you like both, why don't you just get both? Those 2 dresses were literally the same, so that was a crazy idea. I think another alternative is wearing your ceremony dress for most of the night, and then once it's like after dinner, after the cake cutting, after everything, then jump into your like little bridal mini. That's an option as well. Okay, so really funny story. I feel like because the day was just so rushed and there's so many different things going on at the same time, I took photos in my Jimmy Choo Bing 100s. I had every intention of wearing these after the ceremony. So the ceremony area was like in grass. So I was like, okay, I'm just like not gonna wear these on the grass, and then after I'm just gonna switch into them. And I had my Dolce Vita pearl shoes for the ceremony specifically, and they're like a block heel. They're very comfortable to walk in, and I also practiced our first dance in those shoes. So very comfortable, very broken in. And then the day just like flew by, and I forgot to change out of those shoes back into the Jimmy Choos. So I literally have these Jimmy Choos that are practically unworn. I kind of hate myself, but you know, what can you do?
Yeah, they look really nice on the shelf now.
Okay, last 2 questions for wedding fashion and style. What jewelry did I wear, and how was the experience with the rental company? So I worked with Verstolo to do the bridal rental jewelry, and I think it was the best outcome because I would not have shelled out like $10,000 or $12,000 for a 10 karat tennis necklace and like the earrings that I wore. I think it was really good that I was able to borrow them for significantly cheaper price. The only downside with Verstolo and doing a destination wedding is that they needed the jewelry back within 7 days. And because we were traveling before the wedding and after the wedding, I had to ship it to one of my friends who's probably the last person to fly out for our wedding. She works in jewelry, so it was like not a problem for her, but she brought it over to Italy. And then the first people to fly home were actually my parents. So then they took the jewelry back home to the US and then shipped it back to them in New York. So you only have a 7-day period with it. There was no flexibility to extend, and so I think that was the only downside. But I think if you're having a wedding here in the US or you're not doing any traveling before, after, whatever, I don't think it should be a problem. And then last but certainly not least, how long in advance should a groom start looking for a suit? Okay, so we started looking like February?
Yeah, I mean,
January?
you definitely don't need as long, obviously, compared to the dress. I think a lot of these websites, especially the ones that we used and the ones that we considered, so we're talking about Suit Shop, Suit Supply, Indochino, a lot of these have packages and kind of processes in place for wedding parties and grooms like myself, and makes that process very seamless and easy. You essentially just give them your measurements, you look through the store once or twice, and you figure out what you want to do.
You also didn't want like a lot of customizations.
Sure.
I feel like my friend's now husband did a custom suit tux at Indochino, and when we talked to them about that process, I think they said 6 weeks. So even like custom suit, 6 weeks, we went with Suit Shop because first of all, suiting an entire group, it was just way easier that way because it's all like on the website. But also I think you didn't care too much about the customizations of the suit. You'd rather take that same money and gift your groomsmen suits as well.
Sure. And I mean, it was the nice, clean, classic look, I think, that we ended up going for, right?
Yeah,
so
and we went to a wedding in Seattle a week after we came home, and one of our groomsmen was also at that wedding, and he just wore the same tux. So
already paid dividends for him.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. Moving over to wedding experience and advice. What was the most stressful part and the most enjoyable part?
I'd say the most stressful part, I think for me, probably for the both of us, was just the week leading up to the actual day of. Even though we understood all of the kind of travel plans and events, family related and also just wedding related, I think we underestimated how little time we would have just to ourselves to relax and to enjoy the moment and plan as well. So I think the couple days leading up to it especially, I think we must have got 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep a night. I think by the end of it, both of us were pretty exhausted. I think even down to practicing our wedding dance for, I think the first time the whole week, the night before at like 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I think just the lack of time with everything going on, which obviously was super enjoyable, but I think we underestimated the amount of time that we would have to kind of...
Yeah, I think for me, the most stressful part, the entire wedding, and I've talked openly about this before too, I think it was a lot of just opinions. And I think like I would have been maybe less forthcoming with information or like things that I thought I wanted to do or like whatever to minimize on that, just like very easily impressionable. So I think a lot of the opinions and everything like in comments contributed to the stress of wedding planning. And I think like on wedding day as well, I don't know if you felt this as much, but I feel like we had a lot of plans in place that like maybe weren't fully communicated with our planner and like the other vendors that we had, and make sure that everything that we had already decided on, because we spent weeks and days and hours and everything kind of deciding on all of these little details and little plans and like making sure that it was executed correctly. I think that kind of took away from like being able to fully enjoy the wedding day. So I think for me, the most enjoyable part was actually our welcome party. What's your most enjoyable part?
I think welcome party is definitely up there. I think it was a great way to kind of introduce everyone to not only each other, who they hadn't met before, but also give them a nice tour of the lake and Lake Como in general.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were only there for maybe a day or two on their way to either Milan or other parts of Europe. But to kind of give people that experience, and also we got extremely lucky with the weather. The week leading up to our wedding weekend, it was a little bit rainy, and then the couple days after also were overcast and rainy as well. So that first day, that Saturday on the lake, was absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. And it was a beautiful way to say hi to everyone and for a couple hours to kind of just relax and enjoy ourselves on a nice boat on the lake.
We did like a welcome party on a boat, and the boat company was great. It was like just this package. So you tell them how many people are coming, and then you select like the meal package, and then everything else is just like, that's just the price. And I thought in hindsight, if we were to do a welcome party at a hotel and rent out a certain space and do catering and do all of that, I feel like pricing would have been probably the same. And so I think being able to do a welcome party on a boat in Lake Como, like how much more memorable can that get? Any regrets or what you should have done differently? I mean, I kind of touched on this. I think it would be just being less forthcoming about information. I also think that there were certain vendors that I would have maybe wanted to do more research on, or just like communicating and interviewing and like doing all the things. Yeah, I think it's probably those two things.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I think it's difficult in general, planning a wedding halfway across the world. And not being there for things like food tasting or seeing vendors and stuff in person. But I think for the most part, trying to meet people over Zoom and kind of trusting the opinions of folks, I think it overall went pretty smoothly. But again, if we were able to, I think it would have been quite enjoyable to go through a little walkthrough and menu walkthrough especially.
So a lot of our friends that like got to do their wedding here, they got to do the food tasting, they got to walk through the venue, they got to go like venue shopping essentially and go to a bunch of different ones. I feel like we really didn't do that. We just went to our venue after we had already paid the deposit for it, just for like fun in September. And like at that point, realistically, there wasn't anything we could do. We already paid for it, so like you kind of have to go for it. Okay, so the next question is, what part of the wedding day you wanted to be perfect and it didn't happen. I think a lot of it is like small details. I don't think that there was anything that was blatantly wrong with the wedding other than the music. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was miscommunication. I don't know if our planner didn't communicate with the vendor at all. I have no idea, but every single music that we had for the wedding did not start on time.
Yeah, I don't know. We gave timestamps and specific links for certain things, but I think maybe some stuff, again, like you said, they got lost in translation or miscommunicated. But to be honest, once we kind of got started, I didn't notice anything. Like, I was just on autopilot. But I think for certain things, like the first dance, we had to reload the music, I think, three or four or five times before it started at the start of the song, which was a little bit annoying and kind of made things feel a little bit less seamless and a little bit less smooth. But I mean, aside from kind of small things on the edges.
Well, my ceremony song didn't start at the right time either. It was supposed to have the build up, and there was no build up because they just started the song right at the timestamp. And it's frustrating because in the rehearsal, like, we did it correctly, like it was right. And so I'm not sure what happened during the wedding day. It just didn't happen that way. I think the music is probably the biggest one that wasn't done correctly. And then I think there was probably like little things that just weren't set up correctly. Like, we were supposed to have a shoe check essentially for our guests. Like, that wasn't set up correctly.
Yeah, and I think weather also kind of incorporated here. Towards the very, very end of the ceremony, as we were kind of like wrapping up our vows and kind of the end of the officiant's closing remarks, it started sprinkling on us a little bit. Which obviously you don't want it to rain on your wedding. Everyone says it's good luck, but of course you don't really want it to. But we dodged the most of it. It did interfere a tiny bit with a little bit of pictures right after the ceremony, and we were lucky enough to schedule a little bit of a boat photo shoot right after the ceremony, which was super nice. But the weather did also interfere with a little bit of that too, so it took a little bit to both get on the boat, get off the boat, and in general kind of constrained a lot of time that was supposed to be very accelerated and planned out right after the ceremony. But in the grand scheme of things, we dodged most of the bad weather during the week and week around our wedding day.
Yeah, it was like literally raining the entire week, before the wedding, after the wedding, and it's just like Saturday and Sunday that didn't rain. So I think we got super lucky in that sense. Okay, something you decided not to do and wish that you did now that it's over. I think I really wanted to do the fireworks, and then I told my planner, I was like, okay, so realistically, how can we do it? And she's like, yeah, so that's gonna be a 10K minimum. And I was like, oh, 10,000 euro. I think that's also part of where we like went over budget, was because I kept thinking like euros equals dollars, which it hasn't equaled dollars in a couple years now. So that obviously added to the expenses, but I really wanted to do the fireworks. And unfortunately we didn't do the fireworks. We did the box cold fountains or whatever they're called, and that was significantly cheaper, and we had them for the big events like the cake cutting and the first dance. Obviously it would have been great to do fireworks for the wedding, but I think actually being there at the venue and everything, our venue did have a lot of greenery, and it was kind of cloudy that day, and you have to submit permits and do this and do that. There's all these different things. Knowing what we know now about the company that we worked with, you could only work with that specific music company. Like, we couldn't work with any other music company, and knowing how they were with all the other music, I also don't know if that would have gone like haywire. I was actually gonna say, I think we should have either communicated or better planned or had some kind of transportation for our welcome party, because our welcome party is in Chernobyos, and like, you could take a bus, you could take a taxi, or you can take the ferry from Como one stop over to Chernobyos. I think people just didn't plan far enough in advance, and we had a lot of people that were late. People are literally like running, they're texting and be like, oh my god, please don't leave without us. But we did tell everyone 11:30, even though the boat leaves at 12. So it was enough time, except for the groomsmen. Of all people, the groomsmen were late, and they're literally like running down the street, and they got lost, and like, it's all of that. But I'd probably do that differently.
Yeah, because I think it doesn't happen for every like a big city across Europe, but specifically Como, there isn't a lot of infrastructure there for things like Uber and commonly already available taxis that people in the US, for the most part, are accustomed to just clicking a couple buttons on their phone and getting a car to drive them somewhere. So I think people underestimated kind of the ease of getting around. And also, depending on if you use public transportation and buses in your kind of daily life, using it in a foreign country sometimes is also very confusing too. So I think maybe outlining the steps needed to get to the place a little bit better, and following up with people maybe ahead of time.
There were a lot of people that like made it there no problem. And so that's where I don't know, but like also seeing how much the transportation costs like just for the wedding itself. That's an additional cost that you'd have to account for. The next question, were some family members upset that you had a destination wedding? I don't think upset is the right word. I think we knew going into it that if we were to have a destination wedding, like there were going to be some guests that couldn't make it. So my grandma, my extended family couldn't make it.
Yeah, everyone in my extended family came. It was also somewhat easier for some of my European-based extended family and friends to make it too. So they definitely didn't mind. But again, some of the extended family on your side, it was a little bit more difficult for them to make it just in terms of timing and distance. Yeah,
but no one was like verbally upset. And with my extended family, after we did the little celebration, a little banquet down where they live, obviously it's not Lake Como, but like I feel like they still got to be part of a celebration, and it was still nice to see everybody despite not seeing them in Italy. Something you pushed to do and didn't really feel was needed during the wedding. A full service wedding planner. I ended up doing a lot of the work, and I talked to a lot of my friends who also planned weddings recently in the last 2 years, and they also hired full service wedding planners, but they ended up doing a lot of the work. And I went back to look at wedding planners full service. What does that entail? That entails like budgeting, that entails a hotel block, guest communication, designing the wedding, organizing, finding vendors, doing all the things. And I don't know why. I essentially took her job and I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. And I found a lot of the vendors were either, if they're not exclusive to the venue, I went out of my way to go and find them. So my videographer, photographer loved them. They were amazing. And like I found them on Instagram. I feel like budgeting, we're significantly over budget. So I don't think we really got help in that area. Hotel block you managed. We didn't really need a full service wedding planner because I already took care of a lot of different things. I think what I needed was like a day of coordinator. I think that would have been more beneficial for us and like within our budget than having a full service wedding planner, because we ended up doing a lot more work than like we essentially took her job. And then I'm sure there's like little small details. I think the shoe check we also pushed to do, and like we really didn't do it because it wasn't set up correctly.
Yeah, but I think everything else during the kind of day of that we ended up going for, I think it all ended up paying off and was well enjoyed. Everything from the kind of cake we decided on when we didn't get a chance to try it beforehand, but it sounded like everyone really loved it, and it was a really tasty choice. I mean, even stuff like the menu options. Like, again, we picked from photos. We didn't get a chance to try it ahead of time, and all of our foodie friends who were there had nothing but good things to say. So, yeah.
I was kind of surprised the food was so good. I feel like a lot of people say that, but because we didn't get to taste anything, and also you don't go to weddings for the food, you know, you're not like, oh my god, I'm so excited to go to this wedding, the food's gonna be amazing. So I feel like we expected that the food's just gonna be like mediocre, and I feel like it surprised us. I feel like our wedding ceremony area was like also not as expected, but I'm glad we pushed to do it because our ceremony area was actually supposed to be in this like public park. It's technically a public park, and it's like right across from the venue. And so a lot of people who were using the venue rented out the public park for like $200 to get the permit or whatever, and did the ceremony area there, and then had the reception and party and everything at the venue. Around January, we found out that the permit for the city denied that, and they were like, no, you can't use that. So back and forth, we ended up paying extra to go to a bar or like restaurant right next to Villagino. I don't know if they're associated.
I think they have the general same ownership.
You think so?
Yeah, based on the payment information, I think we were paying pretty much the same people for both the venue costs and also the specific area.
And so basically, they built like a specific like area, put up like little fence and everything like that. And so that was also kind of unexpected. That was an unexpected cost. It was also not done until a week before the wedding, and it was just a little bit more hectic. But I think in hindsight, like the view of that area, of the ceremony area, was way better than the view that they had at the park.
Yeah, I think both of us were pleasantly surprised. Like we didn't really have any pictures of it ahead of time, which was a little bit worrying. And the whole aspect of going to Lake Como and having a wedding there, you want a nice view, especially during the ceremony. So I think the alternative was to have the ceremony within the venue. The actual venue was gorgeous. It wouldn't have had that view of the lake.
Yeah.
So really having the view of the lake,
because there was like a lot of greenery like just around the venue. I mean, if you stood up, you could see the lake, but for the most part, we couldn't see the lake from the venue. Okay, and then the last question for the wedding experience, what should you share versus not share with other people, not talking about close friends? Honestly, I had some not very nice comments from like close friends and family too. I was very private about everything, especially from social media leading up to the wedding. So I did talk about decisions I was making, but they were all like very small, like in the grand scheme of things, like not a huge deal to share, and I was very open sharing that. But we didn't share our wedding date because I never share when I'm out of town until after I'm back. We also didn't share the venue that we used. I feel like those are the two things we didn't share leading up to wedding day. And then obviously after we posted everything, then like we're cool sharing it now. If I were to do it again, I'd probably keep things a lot more like close to the chest. I feel like a lot of people had things to say, anywhere from like, why can't I have a +1, or you're making us go all the way to Italy, or why are you spending this much money on flowers, or like whatever it is. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, and then suddenly then not expecting to get the comments that you get, I think like I would have kept a lot more things kind of close to the chest or just like between us.
Yeah, I think it's a balance for you because you do want to share your experience across social media too, but you also want to have your own time, and this is obviously a very special moment for the both of us, and a special event. And I think there was also a point halfway through the wedding planning process, you didn't stop calling yourself a May 2024 bride.
I stopped saying May 2024 bride.
Even though May there's 31 days in it, but you want to, people know you're going to be around Como in May. You don't want anyone to know the date and specific location. So.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. The Friday before our wedding, we were actually getting lunch at Grand Hotel Tremezzo, and someone came up to us and was like, oh my god, I watch your videos, like it's so great to see you. And she actually got married in Lake Como like 2 days before that. It's nice meeting people around the world but then at the same time it's also having to care about like personal privacy and safety and everything. So it's a little bit of a fine line. So the last part is budget and finance. What do you think was the total cost of the wedding? We didn't keep the best track of financing. Everything was paid differently. So like some vendors were paid PayPal, some vendors were paid like Wise transfer, others were like credit card. And so I think we could have done a better job of keeping track, and I think going into wedding planning, we had a lot more flexibility in the sense that we had the financial freedom to spend what we were comfortable spending. So the total cost was a little bit over $100K. How did you come up with a wedding budget and not overspend? So let's just cross out the overspend. What it contributed to the overspend, partially my taste, but also I think we had 20 more wedding guests than we anticipated. I think we were very surprised at how many people were actually able to come to the wedding. I think your planner and like everybody online and whatever, they tell you, oh, expect 50 or 60% attendance rate. So if I'm thinking I want 60 people at my wedding, I should send out 120 invites. We sent around 120 invites and then got 80 people saying that they can come. So I think that we didn't expect to have this many people like being able to celebrate with us, which is obviously not a bad thing at all. So I think that contributed to us going over budget a little bit. And then once we decided on doing a more elaborate welcome party and then also having more people for the welcome party, that contributed as well. But it really is like the small things that add up. You don't really think about it when you get a $200 veil or the dress alterations or the food, and then you want to do a dessert cart and gelato cart and this and that, like all the things like add up.
I think even the things that aren't specifically wedding related expenses too, like the transportation back and forth. We were in Italy for about
3 weeks.
both
We were there for
3 weeks. 2.5, 3 weeks. In a week leading up to go to another friend's wedding and having the hotel costs and transportation, even getting around Italy before the kind of couple days leading up to our wedding. The stuff really adds up over time.
It does. How did you finance or organize funds for the wedding? Paying for this ourselves. I think we're both in a really fortunate position that like we've been working for a couple years. We bought the house, we have savings, and I think that kind of gave us like the flexibility to be comfortable to spend what we wanted to and be able to do like our dream wedding and not feel too confined by budget. We knew going into it we weren't going to do Balmain, like that's an $80,000 venue fee itself. And that was probably one of the most humbling moments.
Not in that tax bracket.
Yeah. But I think like for what we did and like the vision that we wanted for the wedding, I feel like we were able to execute it and feel comfortable spending that amount. Did you or your guests pay for their flights and hotels? So all of our guests paid for their own way and hotel there, which I expected that was common knowledge. Like, if you go to a wedding in, like, Seattle, or you go to a wedding in Colorado or whatever, like, the bride and groom doesn't pay for your flight and hotel there. And I was kind of surprised. We were actually at a wedding in Florence a week before ours, and we were both talking about, really, we're getting a lot of comments on social media about, oh, you should pay for your guest flight and hotel, but I don't think that's common.
I've never heard of it. Our budget definitely would have been maybe twice as expensive.
We would have had 5 people at the wedding if we paid for flight and hotel. I don't know why people on social media, like, you're either able to come and we would love to have you come, or you're not, unfortunately. And I don't think that's common. Yeah. Even if you do a wedding in the US, you don't pay for your guests, all of your guests to come.
I don't know if people are maybe mixing up with, like, getting maybe room blocks for hotels that give, like, slightly discounted rates.
Which we did
for certain areas, yeah, which is a very common thing for weddings, especially in kind of bigger cities. But paying out of pocket for 80 guests to fly...
International is, like, crazy.
I love them all, but I don't think that is a very common thing for any bride and groom to do.
And then the last question is, any unexpected expenses, and how did you manage them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on this maybe a little bit, but there were a handful of kind of unexpected expenses along the way, most of them involving food, travel, the little things that kind of just add up, paying for tax on certain things that weren't in the original budget, but we didn't account for. Yeah, and little things add up. Some of the prices you see online include the VAT, don't include the VAT.
Travel costs for vendors.
Travel costs for vendors. I think just some travel costs, food costs, taxes as well.
I think when you go into wedding planning, I mean, obviously it's going to be way more expensive than you expect. We expected to spend maybe $5,000 or $6,000 on flowers, for example, and I use flowers as, like, the biggest expense because the pricing shocked me. And we got quotes. The first quote we got was for 22,000 euros. So that's like $25,000, and I was expecting to spend $5,000 or $6,000. So I think everything adds up. Even open bar is per person per hour. Our dessert, everything is like per person. So I think everything just adds up, and like before you know it, you're spending $100,000 on a wedding. Okay, well, that sums it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any other questions, and I'll try to answer everything in the comments below. I'll leave all of my vendors linked, everything linked in the description box below. So if you're also planning a wedding, let me know, and let me know if I can help in any way. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for being here. And then we'll leave another video for you guys here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.